For years they waited, some hoping for a miracle, others counting down the days. But in February 2025, the wait ended. The doors to death row swung open, leading 4 men on their final walk to the execution chamber. Some fought until their very last breath, claiming innocence or begging for mercy. Others went silently, resigned to their fate. But no matter how they faced it, death came for them all. Their last meal, their final words. These are the final glimpses into their minds before everything went dark. Who repented? Who remained defiant? Who left this world without a single word? Let's find out. Stephen LaWayne Nelson. Stephen LaWayne Nelson spent his final moments strapped to a gurney in a Texas execution chamber, but his road to that room began years earlier with a horrific crime that shook an entire community. In 2011, Nelson walked into North Point Baptist Church in Arlington, Texas, under the guise of needing help. Instead, he brutally attacked Reverend Clint Dobson, suffocating him with a plastic bag before beating him to death. But he wasn't finished. He then turned to the church's secretary, Judy Elliott, viciously attacking and leaving her for dead. Miraculously, she survived. The crime was senseless and vicious, leaving zero doubt in the minds of investigators and jurors. Nelson was convicted of capital murder in 2012 and sentenced to death. For over a decade, Nelson sat in a tiny death row cell, appealing his sentence while the families of his victims waited for justice. He was no stranger to violence in prison, racking up multiple infractions, including an assault on a corrections officer. Despite his legal battles, the state of Texas scheduled his execution for February 5, 2025. On the day of his execution, he was led into the room where over 500 Texas inmates had died before him. The warden asked if he had any final words. Nelson looked at his wife and said, "I love you, baby." He appeared calm, almost at peace. Unlike many death row inmates who use their final moments to apologize, claim innocence, or lash out, Nelson kept his last words short and personal. His last meal remains unknown, as Texas does not allow special requests. Instead, he was given the standard prison meal of the day, a simple and unremarkable plate of food before his final breath. At 6:00 p.m., the lethal injection process began. Within minutes, his breathing slowed, his body went still, and by 6:10 p.m., Stephen LaWayne Nelson was pronounced dead. A violent life ended in silence, but for the families of his victims, the echoes of his crimes will never fade. Demetrius Terrence Frazier. Demetrius Terrence Frazier spent nearly 3 decades on death row, waiting for the moment the state would carry out his sentence. His crimes were as brutal as they were senseless, leaving a trail of victims that spanned multiple states. In 1991, Frazier broke into the Alabama home of 40-year-old Pauline Brown, a woman who had no connection to him. At the time, he was already a violent offender, wanted in Michigan for the murder of 14-year-old Crystal Kendrick and multiple other sexual assaults. His arrest brought his killing spree to an end, and he was sentenced to death in Alabama in 1996. But for nearly 30 years, Frazier filed appeal after appeal, trying to escape his fate. With every legal battle lost, his execution date was finally set for February 6, 2025. Unlike most death row inmates, Frazier's execution was carried out using nitrogen hypoxia, a controversial method that deprives the body of oxygen, leading to an eventual loss of consciousness and death. This was only the 4th time this method had been used in the U.S., and the first time in 2025. As he was led into the execution chamber, the warden asked if he had any final words. What he said shocked many. Instead of focusing on his crimes or expressing remorse, Frazier used his last moments to attack Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, claiming she had failed the people of her state. However, he also expressed some remorse, saying, "I am deeply sorry for the pain I have caused." His last meal was never disclosed, though Alabama allows inmates to request a special meal before execution. Whether he had one or not remains unknown. As the nitrogen gas filled a mask over his face, his breathing slowed, his body twitched, and within minutes, he was gone. At 6:15 p.m., Demetrius Terrence Frazier was pronounced dead, leaving behind a legacy of violence, controversy, and unanswered questions. James Dennis Ford. James Dennis Ford took his final breath in a Florida execution chamber in February 2025. In 1997, Ford lured Gregory and Kimberly Malnery to a remote sod farm in Florida under the guise of a friendly fishing trip. But once they arrived, Ford attacked them in front of their 22-month-old daughter, Miranda. Gregory was shot and beaten, while Kimberly was raped before being executed. The crime was cold, calculated, and sadistic, and when police caught Ford, his lack of remorse made it even worse. In 1999, a jury sentenced him to death without hesitation. He spent over 25 years on death row, filing appeal after appeal, but in the end, Florida upheld his sentence. His execution was scheduled for February 13, 2025. As he was strapped to the gurney, the warden asked for his final words, but Ford refused to speak. He declined to make any final statement, choosing to die in silence. However, he left behind a written note, though the contents were never publicly disclosed. Some believe it was an apology, while others think it was a final act of defiance. 3 men, 3 executions, and 3 lives ending in cold, sterile rooms. Some went in silence, others spoke their last words, but in the end, death came for them all. Justice or vengeance? You decide. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe for more real-life cases.